Section 2.3.RA-2. The data in a table represent the tuition for all two-year community colleges in a region in 2009 and 2010. Here we have our number of community colleges. Now from the previous exercise, if you watch the previous exercise, we want to be able to draw a frequency ogive. Now in order to do that, we have to create a cumulative frequency distribution. So by creating the cumulative distribution, this is what we have on the right over here. Now, what we want to do is we want to generate a frequency ogive in Statcrunch. Now, in order to do that, we're going to have to open up Statcrunch as a blank page. So when you go to your question help, you can just open it up using Statcrunch, and that's going to give you a blank page. Okay, now let me go ahead back and open it up here. And so the directions are telling us to do the following. Let me minimize this a little bit here. Okay, so what it's telling us is that we want to enter the upper class limits in column variable 1 here, and then cumulative frequency or cumulative relative frequency is going to go in variable 2. But the key thing here is that we have to be sure to enter the upper class limit of the class that would precede the first class, along with a cumulative frequency or cumulative frequency of 0. So what does that mean? That means that if the previous class would be 25 below, so that means that the previous class would be 750, and the upper class is going to be 774. And then we don't have a number for that, so we're going to have to call that 0. So again, going back to what I just stated here, okay, it's saying here that to be sure to enter the upper class limit of the class that would precede the first class, along with a cumulative frequency or a cumulative relative frequency of 0. So that means here we have 774. That is the upper class of the preceding class, and it has a value of 0. So then here's 799, 824, 849, 874, 899, 924, 949, and 974. Okay, and then we're going to enter the numbers that are associated with that. So that is 0. The cumulative frequency is 19 here. For 824, it's 83, 100, 106, 106, 106, 106, and then 109. Okay, and then we're going to name the columns. So let's go ahead and then open this back up again. So here, the column represents the tuitions. So in our Statcrunch, okay, we're going to highlight that, and we can either backspace, delete it, and then put in tuition, okay, with dollars. And then to the right here, we're going to put in cumulative frequency. Okay, now within the column, underneath the column of tuitions, we're going to enter in the upper class limits. So we're starting with 774, 799, 824, 849, 874, 899, 924, 949, and 974. And then with the cumulative frequency for this first class was 0, so we have to start with 0. And then we have 19, 83, 100, 106, 106, 106, 106, and then 109. And again, so the reason why we need to start here is because we want to be able to read our graph, and it's got to start at some value before 19. So we need to put in that 0 as a starting point when we actually graph. So now, the next thing we want to do is we're going to go ahead and graph. So we're going to go ahead and graph, and in order to graph, we're going to select graph and then go down to scatter plot. And then up here, we're going to select which one is the x variable. Well, the x variable is going to represent the x-axis, which is the tuition in dollars. And then the y variable is going to be the cumulative frequency. And then we're going to scroll down to where it says display. So we want to make sure you hold down points and lines. So you got to make sure these two are highlighted. Okay, and I believe the x-axis and the y-axis should already be labeled. So we're going to select compute, and there is our ogive. And let's compare it to the solution, or you would compare it to your solution on your problem. And you can see here that here is our result for this example. Now, you can see here that it starts at 774, right? Well, that's kind of where 774 is. They're using it in increments of 800, 850, 900, but this is the exact same as this ogive here. Okay, now we're going to move down to part B. Now we're going to draw a relative frequency ogive. Okay, now again, in the preceding example, in order for us to find a relative frequency ogive, we need to first create a relative frequency by taking each one of the frequencies and dividing it by the total number, which then would give us the relative frequency. And now, in order to get the cumulative relative frequency, we're going to be adding these numbers to each one to get that result. So we're going to do the same thing like we did in our previous one. Okay, so we're going to open up our information here. Okay, so here's our Statcrunch. And now, again, recall that what we want to do is that we want to create a preceding class. And that preceding class was going from 750 to 774 with a cumulative frequency of 0.000. And so, again, here are the numbers that we're going to use. So we have the upper limits as our tuition. And then these are going to represent our cumulative relative frequency. So let's go ahead and put that information here. So here we want to now call this cumulative relative frequency. And then we're going to put in our number 0, and then we have 0.174, 0.761, 0.917, 0.972, 0.972, 0.972, 0.972, and then 1.00. Okay. Now, of course, the tuition didn't have to change because we already did it from the previous one. And we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and select graph and then go down to scatter plot. We know that our x variable is our tuition and our y variable is the cumulative relative frequency. And then we have our points and our lines need to be highlighted. And then we're going to go ahead and compute. And so now when we compute, we want to compare that to our result. So let's go ahead and do that. So there is our cumulative relative frequency. And again, you can see here it goes from 0 to 1. This goes from 0 to 1. And there is our ogive.